Hey everyone, it's Lexi. So in today's video I'll be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in December, in addition to the books that I plan on reading in January. I feel like I finally hit my stride with reading for 2025, and of course it's the last month of the year. But I've read a total of 7 books, which is really great considering for a lot of the year it was either like 1 or 2 or 3 reads. So I really hit my stride, and part of it is I have become obsessed with puzzles and puzzling, and I would listen to audiobooks while puzzling, especially because I was trying to get to my 50 books per year goal, and the audiobooks really kind of helped out with that. But I kind of read books all over in genres. I revisited some childhood favorites, kind of new books as well, and some nonfiction to kind of throw into the mix as well, which I'm excited to share. But without further ado, let's get started. First up, I have Hemlock Silver by Kingfisher. This is her newest fairy tale retelling that is loosely based off of kind of Snow White in that story here, but we follow this woman who is Anya, who is a healer, and she gets kind of basically approached by the king himself, who wants her to help figure out what is wrong with his daughter Snow. She has it's almost like she's being poisoned and no one can figure out what is going on, and it goes from there. I would say that's maybe the only really connection that we have to, Cinderella, minus kind of the evil, stepmother and all that stuff, but there's some of the tropes in Snow White, but other than that, this is a very interesting take on Snow White and that fairy tale. Overall, like I said, I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I did feel like the book struggled with some pacing issues. In particular, it is more kind of, there were parts where it got, it's really invested, but in the plot and things are really picking up, but then there are some things that are mundane that I feel like could have been shaved down or just kind of removed altogether. I thought that was kind of, I think, the biggest flaw in this, because the end is so spectacular, so fast paced, but there's kind of a lull kind of in the middle where it gets somewhat repetitive and the plot really isn't going anywhere, and I think that's my biggest gripe with that. But and I didn't know what I was getting into because it is so loosely based on Cinderella and some of the Cinderella, I keep saying Cinderella, Snow White, but it's so what some of the kind of major plot points will be, but you don't know how it's going to get there, you don't know where it's going, and that's what I really like, this really kind of fresh take on that. So overall, like I said, I enjoyed this. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and it was a lot of fun, something really unique. Next, as kind of a tradition that I started last year, is to listen to the audiobook for Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. This kind of just gets me into that cozy holiday season vibe, especially when all of the characters have come together at the end to celebrate kind of Christmas or solstice traditions. And so that one was just a fun one to do. I with weather permitting, based on where I live, I try to go for a walk with my dog after work, or sometimes twice a day if I'm working from home, obviously weather pending, but that's what I like to do, and I like to listen to audiobooks. So this is one that I listen to on our walks. Again, this is just kind of a fun Christmas tradition. It's not my favorite of the series, but I still really enjoy it, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I also listened to the audiobook for The Wood at Midwinter, which is kind of this short story. Again, I read this one last year, but I just don't really care for it. It was more just to kind of listen to the audiobook and be able to check it off. I do think there's really interesting parts of this short story. I don't even know how to describe it really, but I just don't get it. So this was, again, just to get to the 50 books. This one was very short. And then I had a little bit of a midlife crisis, but basically I remember I saw an article basically about how the first Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe Disney remake of it came out 20 years ago, sometime that week, and that really gave me a midlife crisis, because I remember going to see that for my 11th birthday party. And so it kind of really threw me through a hole there. But so I was like, you know what? It's been a really long time since I've, read that book, and I watched the movie with my parents maybe within the last 5 years, and it holds up really well. So I was like, let me listen to the audiobook for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and also Prince Caspian. I really love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think it is a timeless classic, and it's just really a lot of fun. It holds up well to my memory, and also having, I being familiar with the films, I feel like the films do a really good job at complimenting this book and kind of staying true to the source material. And so this one was a lot of fun. I gave this a 4 to 5 stars, and it's really nice to see that it's held up to kind of my memory of reading this all those years ago. And Prince Caspian, again, I think this is a case where the movie is better. But I felt like there's just some pacing issues, and it was slightly boring, where it's just like the characters are trying to find each other and they'd only find each other at the end. And I feel like the movie does a better job of kind of expanding on this and not making it as boring. So this one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. I still really enjoyed it, but it's just not as good as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. For audiobooks in particular, I particularly like them for nonfiction, and this is a book that's been on my TBR for a while, so I was like, what better opportunity to finally pick up this chunker of a book, which is the Romanov Sisters by Helen Rappaport. And this basically kind of dives into the kind of 4 sisters of the Romanovs and kind of helps you kind of differentiate them, especially like how it seems like they were, you know, viewed by, you know, their parents. They were always the girls, or to the society just knew them as the Romanov sisters. And this really kind of breaks down their history, you know, who they were with their letter writing, and really kind of pinpointing their different personalities and their different traits. So it was really interesting. It did give me a really big sense, like this is all like, oh my goodness, it keeps going. This is like all basically references. They include a lot of different letters, things that actually were written by the girls or people near them. So it was really interesting, you know, getting to kind of know, know more about these girls and the stoicism that they had, especially it seemed towards the end. This book did give me a really big sense of dread and anxiety. Like honestly, I don't know, there's something about the massacre of this family that, I don't know, it's really stuck with me. I remember learning about it at school, and it really scared me and like traumatized me. And I think it was like the brutality of it, and basically at the end of the day, like they're kids. Like this family were mostly kids, and just that I think really stuck with me, even learning about this and, you know, in high school. So it did give me a really big sense of dread. And she has another book too that talks about their like final days in captivity, but I was reading some of the reviews, and it's very graphic, so I think I need to be in a good headspace for that, because like I said, this gave me a good amount of anxiety. But I really loved how much research went into this, how much, you know, I was able to learn more about the 4 sisters and what their life was like, and all that stuff. So again, there's something really haunting about it, but I think for a nonfiction, this doesn't really read like a textbook. It's more of like a kind of novelization of their life with, you know, diary entries, and there's like, you know, references throughout everything. So, you know, it's well researched, what I appreciate. But yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed this, but it gave me anxiety, so just, you know, be forewarned. And she doesn't really like go into their final moments. Like it's just kind of very brief. I think her first book goes more into the brutality, which I appreciated, because at this point I was really stressing about this. But yeah, overall I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I do want to read her other book, but yeah, I just need to be in a good headspace for it. And lastly, my final book of the year and my 50th book of the year was the Downton Abbey, the grand finale film companion. I have one of these for each of the films, and we finally watched this final film with my parents, and so I was waiting to hold out because I didn't want to be spoiled about it. Basically, the only thing I knew about it is that it took place in the 30s, basically. But I really like this. I cried at the end of the movie, and this is, I feel like, I really like kind of learning more about, you know, what the set design was like. How do they, you know, recreate some of these places to be, you know, as historically accurate as possible? Like, what are some of the, you know, costume design, and like learning all about that. So I think that's just really interesting. I think if you're a fan of Downton Abbey, you like the movies, I think these are pretty well done. So I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So moving on to my January reads, I've already been off to a great start. I'm filming this on January 6th, and I've already finished 3 books so far, which I'm very proud about. So I'll quickly just mention the ones that I have already finished. The first book of the year, which I finished on January 1st, it just worked out timing wise because I had like 40 pages left, is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Morena-Garcia. This is basically like a very less steamy version, like family friendly version of kind of like Bridgerton and Pining, with a little bit of magic. Basically, the premise of the story follows this girl who is basically sent to her cousin's house in the city to find a husband during kind of, the season in this kind of fictional, country basically. And she's very much kind of a societal outcast because she has this like rare power that lets her kind of move things with her mind. And so she forms a kind of friendship with one of the kind of very prominent like stage like presenters or like stage I guess performers that do that kind of telekinesis like movement, and we find out very early on that he's only using getting close to our main character because he once had a, fling 10 years ago with her aunt. And it kind of goes from there. This, I won't go too much in the review of this, but that's basically like a less steamy version of Bridgerton, and I really enjoyed it. Next, because I'm a puzzling addict, I finally decided to pick up The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson. This is his newest nonfiction about kind of basically the events that ultimately led to the Civil War, the South Carolina, leaving the United States and everything that followed after that. This one was really interesting. I think this is a very interesting time period, and he talks about how a lot of the stuff that was kind of going on in the South, with the South wanting to, be separate from the North, and that sentiment and thinking is very reminiscent of, today. And he talks about how when he was writing this, he remembers turning on the news and seeing the insurrection on June 6th, and how that parallels a lot with what he was writing about in that sentiment and what that thinking can ultimately lead to, which I think just shows how important it is to know your history, because history just repeats itself unless we do something about it. So this one again was really interesting, and like I said, nonfiction I do prefer kind of listening to on audiobook, especially now that I'm a puzzling addict. And the last book that I've already read so far is The Look by Michelle Obama. This is her newest book that has come out, and this will honestly be one of my greatest prized possessions because I was able to snag a signed copy, which is just so cool. But it basically just talks about how once she became kind of under the magnifying glass of the public eye, once Barack became president, a lot of what the media talked about wasn't necessarily her, what she was trying to do with getting kids to move, eating healthier, all the things that she was trying to support. It really came down to, how she looked. And so she wanted to kind of use that to basically use her clothes, use how she presents herself as a way to talk about important things. Oh, you can hear Willow crying in her sleep. But this one's interesting. It talks about, the members of her team who helped her with all that stuff. It kind of gives you, behind the scenes and, some of how she's learned to really kind of embrace who she is and not really care about what the public will think about her, especially how much she was under a microscope with everything that she did, her hair, her makeup, her clothes, everything. And now she's learned to kind of just embrace who she wants to be. So I really enjoyed, learning her story and all that. And eventually, of course, I will dive into this a little bit more in my wrap up. Oh, Miss Willie, you're tired. All right, so the last two books, this is one that I'm currently reading right now, and oh my gosh, you guys, I haven't been this engrossed and this like ensnared by a book in a really long time, and it is A Resistance of Witches by Morgan Ryan. This is a book that I saw on the Goodreads 2025 top fantasy voting, one of the ones you could vote on, and also was one of Barnes & Noble's as well. But basically it's kind of World War II, but with witches. And so we follow Lydia, who is this really kind of up-and-coming witch who is working for, London and kind of helping with the war effort in England. But the Nazis have been recruiting witches in order to find this, book of spells that can be used to, aid their war, basically. And so she's tasked with finding this book and putting an end to it. I'm only 50 pages in, but oh my goodness, you guys, like I said, I haven't been this ensnared by a book in a really long time, and it is a perfect delight. It blends my two favorite genres, some of my favorite genres, which is like World War II historical fiction and also fantasy elements as well. So this one, again, I've really enjoyed, and so I'm, you know, hoping this will be maybe a 5-star read, you know. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, really loving this one so far. And lastly, this is a carryover from my December TBR, but it's a little bit on the shorter side, so I thought this one would kind of just be a good one to round out my month with. And it is The Curious History of Irish Dogs by David Blake Knox. This is a book that I picked up on my honeymoon when we were in Ireland last year, and it kind of talks about the kind of the different you know, breeds, you know, like Irish, there are 9 breeds of dogs that are native to Ireland, 4 terriers, 3 gun dogs, and 2 hounds, and then here are the stories of each of those breeds with a wonderfully Irish flavor. I love dogs. They're my favorite animal in the whole world, so it'll be interesting to kind of learn about, you know, their breed, how these breeds came about, and how they're very much kind of integral to, you know, Ireland, Irish culture, all those things. It's like how golden retrievers like Willow are from Scotland. So I like learning how breeds came about. So yeah, I thought this one will be a fun short read, and it's, you know, just over 200 pages. So it'll be kind of a nice cleanse to some of the more kind of heavier books that I've read this month. But that is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books that you read in December and which ones you're excited to dive into this month and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.